Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this empowered chat about Secure 2.0. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Steven Gibson and Gerald Wernette, who are retirement planning consultants with Raymond. Before we get started, let's dive in to what actually is Secure 2.0.
Sure, I'll go ahead and touch on that, Christina. Secure 2.0 was actually a part of the Consolidated Appropriations Act that was passed December 29th of 2022. So a huge bill coming out of Congress, and Secure 2.0, a piece of that, specifically Division T, which we've finally labeled as Secure 2.0, contains 92 provisions touching on all different types of both qualified retirement plans and IRA provisions and a few other savings related provisions in there, specifically 529 plans. So a lot of depth and breadth to this bill. This bill itself was, I think, almost 300 pages of content. So a lot for us to wrap our arms around.
Thank you, Gerald. Now, why should you care about Secure 2.0? Stephen, do you have anything on that?
Well, first, all legislation, right, should be cared about. Us working in the retirement plan industry are paying careful attention to this one because, as Gerald mentioned, 92 plus provisions it's not your small change. It's going to have wide sweeping changes across every type of retirement plan. And by putting it on the back burner, really two things could happen. The best case scenario is you end up with a plan that isn't optimized to your particular needs and what your desires are. Or in a worst case scenario, you're operating your plan in an old fashioned and not according to any new terms. And that can be very costly. So you should care about it because there are a variety of different provisions in here which you can take advantage of to tailor your retirement plan to your participants. And whatever your goals for the plan may be, there are going to be methods in this legislation to help reach those goals.
Thank you, Stephen. So every tax bill comes with the government giving and the government making us pay. What is a provision that is going to end up costing them?
Yeah, so when we look at this bill, we're going to have provisions in here that are both mandatory and optional, and they all feel like they have a little give and take to them. So as an example, one of the areas in the bill that gets touched on in a few different ways are catch-up contributions. And we see those in our tax deferral plans. They get highly utilized by people who are getting closer to retirement, just looking to want to save more. So on the giving end of it, we're seeing a provision in here that is allowing people who are getting closer to retirement, specifically ages 60 to 63, to give a larger catch-up contribution. But on the taking away end of it, or the costing end of it, we're seeing another provision that basically is saying for individuals who are making more than $145,000 a year, their catch-up contributions are only going to be allowed to be made Roth. Well, Roth, you don't get the tax deduction at the time you're making the deferral. So that in effect is a cost. We're giving something back. So definitely some give and take going on in these provisions.
Yep. And on that Roth catch up, as far as the implementation, there are still a lot of questions that need to be answered in order to see how it's going to play out. One example would be recharacterization of deferrals to catch up contributions for plans that fail testing. You know, historically speaking, if you put in the money and you didn't pass testing, you could get something recharacterized as a catch up. Well, what happens if the recharacterization should be in Roth instead of pre-tax? How does it impact taxes, right? And the other interesting note that Gerald was talking about, it's only FICA wages, and it's $145,000 the prior year. So there'll be instances in which you may hire someone middle of the year So even though they might be considered a highly compensated employee for their base salary for the first 2 years, they still might be able to take up and do pre-tax catch-ups. So there are a lot of little intricacies to these which need to be addressed and looked at.
Thank you. Now 92 provisions. That is a lot. What are some of the key provisions that someone should give immediate action to?
Yeah, so this 92, but it's not all at once, which is a really great thing. So there was a handful of provisions which had an immediate effective date or effective in 2023. And then there are provisions in 2024 and 2025 and beyond. And the way that I like to look at it is, what can you control? So there are provisions that are effective immediately, which are optional, that plan sponsors will have the decision on if they want to implement or not. And then there's also mandatory provisions. Now on the mandatory changes, right, it's understanding what the record keeper provider plans for how to implement those. For example, the change in the required minimum distributions from 72 to 73, and then in the year 2033, increasing it to age 75. Something like that is going to be built out by the record keepers. But it's making sure that plan communications are set, that your record keepers know the 5% owners that don't get that RMD waiver if they're still working. Whereas if we switch over to the optional provisions for 2023, there's a provision in there that allows employers to match or to have matching or non-elective contributions treated as Roth contributions. So up until the passing of Secure 2.0, all employer contributions were made on a pre-tax basis. That's now changed to where employers can allow participants to select whether they want it as a Roth or a pre-tax. This is another one of the government taketh, as Gerald was talking about. This is a revenue raiser because those will be tax dollars coming in. There's still questions surrounding that provision. How will it work? How will it operate? How will the taxes be paid? Will it be a 1099? Will it flow through some other way? So while employers have the ability to say yes or no and add that provision right now, the record keepers aren't ready to record keep it. And the other one, and that's in 2023, the other optional one in 2023 to look at is allowing employers to allow employees to self-certify for hardships. Going back when hardships first were out, it was up primarily to the plan sponsor to collect the documentation and determine if a specific hardship met the needs and they could get a distribution. And then that switched to the record keepers offering that ability to approve hardships. Now the government has blessed participants self-certifying that they meet one of those hardships. This is optional. And I've seen it two ways. And Gerald, do you let me know if you've seen it another one? But one of them is the plan sponsor is really concerned about leakage, money leaving the plan, and allowing participants to self-certify for hardship scares them because they think that their employee base may take advantage of it and what's designed as retirement money will go out the door. And then I see other plan sponsors which are more than happy to offload that administrative responsibility as it is now allowed, and just looking for any way to make the plan more efficient. What have you seen, Gerald?
Yeah, I think you're making a good point. And I think to kind of sum this up, every employer is going to have to invest some energy in looking at these provisions because of the fact that you have optional, you have mandatory, they're coming in play in different dates. There's going to be a lot of dependency on things like the record keeper, your payroll provider, what your investment advisor thinks, and how some of these provisions are going to impact other provisions in your plan, or the fact that maybe you don't have proper provisions and your plan's going to need to be amended in order to accommodate some new provisions. at the end of the day, they really need to invest some of their own energy in really gaining an understanding of what's going on here. And the comments Stephen just shared on the depth and breadth of all these different factors, and the fact that we're waiting on guidance from the IRS to really determine how these are going to play out, that's all going to be very important. So there's a lot to chew on here, and everybody's going to need to invest some energy in looking at it.
Yeah. And if you don't have a plan, right, there are things in Secure 2.0 to make it as beneficial as ever to start a plan. The incentives that were previously out there to cover a portion of the startup costs can now cover up to 100% for employers with under 50 participants, as well as an additional credit for employer contributions. So if you're sitting here and you're listening to this and don't have a plan or thinking about it, there's not a better time to do the due diligence to see if it makes sense.
Thank you, guys. This was a great empowered chat. Reach out to either of these two or any Raymond advisor who will be able to help you. Thank you guys for joining us today, and have a wonderful rest of your day.